Gold participants from around the world. Welcome to Learning. My name is Kristen Schwartz. I'm a licensed midwife and MC here for Gold Learning. And we are back here once again in our Meet the Speaker series. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Saraswathi Vedam, who will be presenting at the Gold Midwifery Online Conference 2019. And I'm so glad to have you here with me, Saraswathi.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
So I know you have spoken for Gold in the past, and many of our listeners know you. You are well known in the midwifery community, but please be so kind and let our new listeners know a little about yourself. You have such an impressive background. You're a midwife, an educator, and a researcher. So tell us a little about your journey, your professional journey, anything you've been working on, and what is in the works now for you.
Okay. Well, I have been very fortunate to serve childbearing families across the United States, in Canada, and in some other countries where I have collaborations and visit and go to support the development of midwifery and development of high quality care and physiologic birth and undisturbed birth, or in some countries they call it humanized birth. I've been to Chile and Mexico, China, Hungary, various European countries, India, South Africa, and I've in all of those places and in my own professional life, I'm a U.S. trained certified nurse midwife. I am also a registered midwife here in Canada for the last 12 years, and I've practiced mostly myself in North America, although because of my work in supporting other developing midwifery communities and maternity care communities, and I have witnessed and been alongside midwives who are doing midwives and maternity care and health workers all over the world that are doing remarkable things to try and bring quality, respect, and safety as the service user defines safety back to the conduct of pregnancy, birth, and care for the newborn. I started out as a midwife in upstate New York. I was a relatively young person, 25, I think, when I started out, and I was not a parent yet. I worked in a very large and busy service that was at that time called a health maintenance organization that had never had midwifery before. I then became a parent myself, and over the next 18 or 19 years, worked in a variety of states in the United States. And as a person of color, I was often sought out by communities of color and communities who couldn't otherwise find a maternity provider that was resonant with their background. And so I've been invited into homes and very privileged to learn from many different cultures about what is important to them and what safety means to them. And I've attended people over the course of their childbearing, or sometimes, unfortunately, with losses, in various settings, in clinics, in offices, private offices, in birth centers and homes, and hospitals, of course, in hospitals that are community hospitals as well as tertiary care hospitals. My family, for our other family needs, moved a bit, and so I was in upstate New York, in California, in Indiana for some years, and then back. I was recruited to be back on the faculty of Yale University, where I had done my original education, and then invited to come here to BC, to Canada, and it's been an interesting and very enlightening time for me as I moved from midwifery and mothering into a more academic role and then into more of a research role. I have my research is certainly informed by the midwifery model of practice, which is a dialogue and always trying to achieve an equity approach to care and partnering with families as far as their priorities and trying to be in that watchful expectancy role around their health and safety. And that I think led to a natural alignment with what's called community-based participatory research, which is a service user, some people say patient-oriented outcomes or patient-led research. Or the point is that the person who's receiving care is the person who then decides, what to study and how to study it, and informs the research process all the way through. And that style of research for me makes it very resonant with my pragmatic experience in practice, and also very resonant with trying to be respectful of the culture and background that each of our service users comes from, so that we can individualize care. So today, my plan is to share some of that research and the outcomes, which are really, I happen to be the coordinator of this multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder team for some of these projects, and the data that I will share was absolutely generated by the service users and is not really my data. I'm sharing with their permission and endorsement the words of the people who have been experiencing maternity care in North America. Interestingly, we find that some of the themes that they are talking about are also being talked about globally in the global south, in high, middle, and low resource countries all over the world. In fact, the World Health Organization has been paying an increasing attention to experience of care as being part of quality of care. So the other part of my work has been in convening interprofessional teams, that is, multidisciplinary teams that are not just doctors, midwives, nurses, but also service users and health systems experts and policymakers and human rights lawyers and liability experts and payers and the whole system in the room to address issues that are causing impediments to people's access to high quality care. So I started that work some years ago with convening a home birth summit of leaders from 9 stakeholder groups who got together to address their shared responsibility for those families who are choosing to deliver in the community at homes or birth centers. That led to 2 more summits and a lot of focus on equitable access. And we are about to convene our 4th summit after a 5-year gap, where we're actually going to focus on implementing some of the innovative tools and resources and innovative models of care that have emerged in the last 5 years because of our interprofessional and multidisciplinary work. So I'll talk a little bit about that some upcoming summit towards the end of my talk here.
Well, thank you for sharing. I find it absolutely fascinating that you took, as you say, that midwifery model of care into research and conduct your research according to that. That is a wonderful news to me, because where else can we apply that model of care into research, into other practices, into our lives. So I find that really fascinating, and thank you also for sharing the Birth Summit work that you're doing. Very important work there, and looking forward to hear what the next summit will bring. Now let's talk a little bit about your upcoming presentation. They threatened and bullied me, examining disparities in autonomy, respect, mistreatment across childbearing communities. Tell us a little bit about your presentation. Of course, not too much, because we want our listeners to come to the presentation, but just give us a little overview what you will be presenting.
Well, I'm pleased to be presenting the results of a national study. Well, it's actually the results of 2 studies, one done in Canada and one in the U.S. But they are very similar themes that have emerged, because it turns out that childbearing families are childbearing families, wherever they live, and they have very similar priorities, regardless of their the priorities and preferences seem to be very similar across, despite of their socioeconomic or cultural backgrounds. What's different, unfortunately, is their experience of treatment. So what these families, and particularly in this case, people who self-identify as women who are pregnant or gave birth, they have very common priorities that emerge as far as the style of care that they want and what's important to them during the course of care, but they have very different experiences of care depending on their socioeconomic status, their risk status, the type, the course of care, and whether or not they experience interventions, and whether or not they come from one community of color or another. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. We did get robust participation both in this provincial study in BC across very diverse groups and across communities of color all over the United States. And so I'm going to talk about some new tools to measure things like autonomy and respect and mistreatment that the service users designed and validated, and then how, when we use them in this survey, national survey, what we found, and what it can tell us about how we can address the very disturbing health disparities that exist in all across North America, and particularly in the United States.
So if I understand this correctly, the service users shaped the research. They decided with you as in the team what will be researched. Is that correct?
That's right, and how to ask the questions, and how to interpret the data that we got as well.
That is absolutely fantastic. I think that's how research should really be done, because then we're getting really results that are usable, not by the people who really are involved and are experiencing care on a daily basis. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation very much, to see where we're at and what needs to be done to improve things across here. So before I let you go, please let us know what you're hoping our listeners will take away from this presentation.
Well, I think to address these very disturbing findings, it is important to not dwell on the fact that there are these disparities, and that they have certainly something to do with race, implicit bias, inequities in access to high quality care. I think really it's time to stop sort of talking about, well, we should never stop talking about the fact that that exists, but it's really these findings, I think, can inform what we need to do to start to change that. And I think what I hope that the listeners will take away from is the ability, depending on their role in the system, of being aware when they witness these things, and some ideas about how they can start to work with service users to change, and the health systems where people work and their colleagues, to try to from a local level to maybe an institutional level to a regional level and to a health system, depending on where you engage with it, that we've come up with some ideas. We're emerging we have some tools and resources. That's what we'll be talking about at the summit, and we need everyone to be talking about these methods and innovative models, and how they can, if they become standard of care, that we can actually start to shift these disparities.
Wonderful. We are able to shift by talking, as you said, talking about it, but also then taking informed action and moving forward and making change. I'm so looking forward to this presentation, Saraswathi, Vedam. It's our treat here at Gold to have you, as always. It's wonderful for you to sit down with me here today and chat about your background and your presentation here at Gold. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for your time. Yeah, see you next week.
Thank you so much. The presentation, They Threatened and Bullied Me, Examining Disparities in Autonomy, Respect, and Mistreatment Across Childbearing Communities, is part of the Gold Midwifery Online Conference 2019, and that presentation will be live on February 11th. So to our speakers, if you would like to find out more about this presentation and the other presentations in the Midwifery Online Conference, please visit goldmidwifery.com. Thank you all for listening. Bye-bye.